In my ongoing video series reviewing classic sci-fi films, I recently rewatched Forbidden Planet from 1956. This was a film directed by Fred M. Wilcox, and it starred Leslie Nielsen in the primary role of Commander John J. Adams. Of course, most people will know Leslie Nielsen from his role as Frank Drebin from the Police Squad TV series and subsequent Naked Gun films, as well as comedy films like Airplane. You may not immediately recognize him in Forbidden Planet because he's so young and he's playing in a serious role here, which seems so unusual considering his film career would later develop to being all about comedy. But he's nonetheless a very strong leading man in the role of Commander Adams. In the distant future, mankind has sent the flying saucer C-57D to the planet Altair 4 to find out what happened to a lost Earth expedition from 20 years ago. The ship makes use of hyperdrive technology capable of faster-than-light travel. For a film made 64 years ago, the visual effects are fantastic, very impressive, and it wouldn't be until 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968 that they would be surpassed. The universe of Forbidden Planet and its technologies, parameters, and rules, it's also very well defined. It's very well developed. Despite some very corny dialogue in places, some cringy scenes between Alta and the crew, this is generally a fairly clever, cerebral movie. The sets are very impressive, and the fantastic production values mean that the film has dated very well. The film definitely has a Star Trek original series feel to it. It feels like a big-budget feature-length episode of Star Trek, and that should probably come as no surprise given that Gene Roddenberry drew inspiration for Star Trek from this film. The ship lands on the planet and the crew disembark. On the planet's surface, they're greeted by Robbie the robot, who agrees to transport them to meet one of the expedition scientists from the starship Bellerophon. You might also recognize this iconic robot from Lost in Space. They meet Dr. Edward Morbius, who's been living on the planet in relative comfort and seclusion, and all his needs are met by Robbie's tireless service to him. Morbius has a daughter, Alta, who's never been to Earth, and she's lived a sheltered life with no other human contact besides her father. Though there's some initial competition for her affections, Commander Adams eventually wins her over. Morbius doesn't want to leave the planet. He explains that the Bellerophon crew were killed by some terrible force. The ship itself was vaporized. Long story short, the crew goes snooping around Morbius's home to discover that all is not what it appears to be. Morbius has been studying the remains of an ancient and highly advanced alien society known as the Krell, the native race of Altair 4. He shows them a gigantic underground facility, and there's some pretty impressive compositing effects used to make the actors seem small against the massive scale of the alien buildings. Morbius shows them the sophisticated Krell technologies and power source and explains a device that, when placed on a person's head, can greatly enhance human intellectual abilities. Morbius has learned, over time, to use this equipment, and it has more than doubled his IQ. Meantime, the hostile and invisible alien force is loose, and Adams orders that the ship be protected by a force field, which the alien creature soon attacks. Morbius claims to have had a vision of further attacks on Adams' crew. The creature kills some of them. Dr. Ostro attempts to use the metal enhancement device, and it kills him, but before he dies, he explains to Adams that the Krell didn't account for monsters from the id. Adams realizes that the machine had allowed pure thought to manifest into reality. The alien force is, in fact, Dr. Morbius's own subconscious, creation by mere thought. He created the creature, and he doesn't even realize it. Morbius's id creature went out and killed the Bellerophon crew. The creature acted upon underlying deep-seated human instinct and violent impulses buried in his subconscious mind. The creature became unstoppable, and none of the defenses they used were strong enough to shield against it. Morbius ultimately has to acknowledge that this creature is a projection of his own darkest thoughts. This is why he was having the visions and dreams. The reason the creature began to attack Morbius's own daughter was because he didn't want her to leave the planet. Barricading themselves in the Krell laboratory, the alien creature feeds off the reactor to break through the Krell barrier. Morbius has to acknowledge this reality and pleads with the creature to stop. After he collapses and the creature ceases, he tells Adams how to set a self-destruct of the facility. He dies, and Adams takes Alta aboard the C-57 along with Robbie the robot. They escape Altair 4 before it explodes. Forbidden Planet is a simple story by today's standards, and it's a bit slow in places. But I think what made it a classic at the time was that there had been nothing quite like it in terms of visuals, production values, scope, and overall execution. The story attempted to strive for something a bit more highbrow than most campy sci-fi films of the era, and it set a high bar for future films in the genre. The alien antagonist isn't defeated with a bare-knuckle fistfight. This is a conflict that has to be resolved with the human mind and with logic and reason. The film must have been a groundbreaking spectacle for cinema-going audiences at the time, as the filmmakers did an excellent job creating the universe of the film and the various elements, effects, the alien planet, Robbie the robot, the C-57D, the Krell technologies, the alien entity. All of these things feel believable and part of an immersive world. Having watched it again, this film feels like a big-budget pilot for a TV series. And when it concluded, I felt like I wanted to see more adventures with Commander Adams and his crew. It's a shame that a sequel was never made. Those are my thoughts on this classic Forbidden Planet. Be sure to check it out, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.